Hello, my name is Sullivan Hammett, and this is going to be my presentation on Petrarch. So, a little bit about Petrarch before I get started is he was a scholar and a poet during the early Italian Renaissance, very impactful for the Renaissance period, and also he was known as one of the earliest humanists and a founding father of the humanism belief. All right, so now I'll be talking a little bit about Petrarch's early life. So he was born in 1304 in Arezzo, Italy, and born under the legal name Francesco di Petrarch. He moved around Italy in his early life with his dad and his brother through a variety of different places, doing different things. His dad was a lawyer, so his dad had a lot of important jobs to fulfill, and as a result of that, he kind of moved around with him with his brother. But his kind of academic career starts in 1316 when he studied at the University of Montpellier until 1320. He was studying law, and this is mainly because his father was a lawyer, and his father kind of really forced that upon him and kind of told him, like, this is where you need to be. This is where the money's going to be. And after that, he studied law again at the University of Bologna, 1320 to 1323. But what's really interesting is that he considered these years of schooling basically a waste because his real interest was in writing, specifically Latin literature. He loved it a lot, but his father didn't really approve of it as much, so it kind of strayed him away from the writing. But after his schooling, he kind of really found his purpose and decided what he was going to do with his life. All right, so now I will be jumping into the early career of Petrarch, specifically 1340 through 1353. So after his literature career kind of started to kick off and he started to get recognized as a scholar, he served as an ambassador around Europe, going around to a variety of countries, basically teaching people and helping out with the church, literature, through a variety of things. But one of the main things he was doing while he was traveling was looking for classical manuscripts of Latin literature that he could use, read, and kind of develop his work with those works. Around this time, he began Africa, which is one of his most famous works. A lot of his works weren't really published until later on, where people kind of took his unfinished work and finished it years later. And Africa is one of these, but it is one of his most famous works, and he's largely credited to the creation of it. And so again, as I said, his scholar status is starting to really spread, and people are starting to hear about the geniusness of Petrarch. So he got invitations from Paris and Rome to be crowned as a poet, and this was huge for him. But basically, he knew his answer right away. He knew he had to go to Rome. He loved Rome. He loved Italy as well, and that's where he wanted to be. Part of the reason of that is he had dreams of restoring the Roman Republic, using his law skills, and really just kind of, just bringing back the strong government that Rome used to have. Also around this time, Black Death was booming. This, kind of resulted in a lot of losses of close loved ones and friends, and it kind of did start to take a toll on not just him but pretty much everyone around this time period. And then lastly, he started his work, Rime, which was about the death of his loved one, Laura. It's now called the Second Canzoniere, but it's probably his most famous work. It wasn't, yeah. All right, now I'll be jumping into his late career, 1353 to 1374. So Black Death was happening. Lots of his loved ones were, being murdered by the plague, and with not much left, he decided to move to Milan. Also attempting to kind of escape and run away from the plague, trying to spare his own life. But in Milan, he stayed there for 8 years, and he basically just started grinding out his works, his literature. His first complete edition of Rhyme was finished in Milan, so that's probably his most notable work that he did in Milan. But eventually, after those 8 years were up, trying to escape the plague and moving around, he moved back to Padua, and then eventually back to Venice. After some time in Venice, he was actually called to Rome to assist the papacy, which kind of was his dream. He really wanted this his whole life, and so he immediately, took the opportunity and decided to travel back to Rome. Unfortunately, he did not make it there. He got a stroke in Ferrara, and he basically was bedbound for a good amount of time. But during this time period, it was not useless for him. He continued to work on his works, work on his literature, and proceeded to, produce more content. But eventually, he did pass away. He didn't quite make it to Rome to assist the papacy that he dreamed of. But regardless, he still had a very influential life, creating a large sum of works and being known as a great scholar and human. Philosophy that Petrarch lived by and passed on. All right, so now jump into the theology and philosophy that Petrarch lived by and passed on to future generations. So, firstly, he was regarded as the father of humanism. Basically, the main ideas of humanism are the recovery of classical knowledge and values, individualism, and your faith with God. So, as you can probably tell from my presentation, he lived by these and swore by these. He was huge in recovering classical literature. He was very inspired by it, and he also felt that it could help further, the future of literature, making it even better. Also, individualism. He just really wanted people to, be individual in their thinking, in their thoughts, and just and what they do in their daily life. Because without individualism, you kind of have a world that isn't really available to much change. And lastly, faith. Faith was a huge part of his life. He constantly was questioning himself and his faith, and if he was doing the right thing. So this is why he basically is regarded as the father of humanism. Also, some people claim him to be the father of the Renaissance, and this is largely attributed to his connection to humanism. Also, his revival of classical literature. That was a huge thing about the Renaissance, is it kind of really went back to the classical days and just really improved on it, made it better. And he kind of was one of the first people to really, use this idea. And lastly, his works were basically used as a model during the High Renaissance period, where, he basically, without his works, there wouldn't be, such an influence during this period. And lastly, religion, very faithful guy, and he kind of inspired others to kind of be faithful with their faith and just kind of really stick with it and really ensure that you're doing the right thing and you're really following your own beliefs. All right, finally, I will be talking about the legacy that Petrarch left behind. So if you couldn't tell already, his legacy was absolutely massive. He was regarded as the father of Renaissance, father of humanism, and without his ideals and his many works, we would not have the world we live in today, from a philosophy standpoint as well as a literature standpoint. He left basically the main legacy that he left behind was his works, which again were a model for the Renaissance. Many people really saw him as one of the greatest, and they took his works and his revival of classical literature to heart and really bettered the literature world as we know it. He also left a variety of unfinished works. This allowed other artists to better understand his works, improve on it, and just kind of gain a certain level of respect from it, and kind of get their own names out there. Next, patriotism, which basically was a 16th century movement that really idolized Petrarch in his many works. They kind of, constructed their own works after him and what he did. And what's really cool is that, it's a 16th century movement, so it was a long time past his lifespan, and you can really see the true impact, the legacy that he had, because even years and centuries past his life, people are still using and idolizing his work. Lastly, his rediscovery of Cercio's letters. Cercio was a Roman politician and lawyer, and the rediscovery of his letters is basically regarded as the moment, or the moment where the Renaissance was started. So yeah.